Okay, this is a simple thing about tires. We got the part of the tire that's just under the tread of a radial tire is called the
Bed belt.
bead nut belt. Is it the belt or the bead?
It says
It's the belt.
on there.
Okay, well, I figured everybody gonna argue with me about this, okay? Because if you know your stuff, you'll argue when I give you a wrong answer, won't you? Okay, so it actually is a belt, right? So. Now, have you ever seen people use tires to burn, to get something burnt, like throw tires on there and they burn stuff with the tires?
Yeah, start to burn.
Have you ever seen the steel belts left after the tire burns up, you know? That's all that kind of thing. And so what's those belts there for?
Make the tire stronger.
Yeah, a little bit. You can still puncture it though, can't you? The aspect ratio of a tire means what? The ratio of height to width, and you saw on this little thing I got stuck on the wall over here. And it uses millimeters, so that's a metric size and all that. Back in the olden days, before there were radial tires, there were bias ply tires that were a little bit different, didn't hold the road quite as good as a radial or anything like that. Matter of fact, there was this lady that one time that back whenever there were, some cars had bias ply tires and some cars had radial tires, and I told this story the other day, but there was she had bought a car that belonged to our company, and the guy that was driving the car that had a car just like it at home, and he took the two best tires off of the company car and put them on his car, and the two worst tires off of his car. Anyway, she wound up buying, this lady bought that car from the company after the guy quit driving it. Okay, so I never even saw the car in between, but anyway, she took it, and he had put, they had bias ply tires, which don't hold the road as good, on the left front and the right rear, and radial tires on the right front and the left rear, as I remember. And she was in traffic up there, and she hit the brake, and the thing went into a spin, and she had a big nasty crash. Now, it didn't hurt her, tore the car all to pieces though. And they told me to go look at it and see if I could figure out what had gone wrong with it. And I went to the salvage yard, they had, had it in their boneyard, and I could see that guy had changed out those tires. And it had, bias ply tires on the left front and the right rear. It's a bad idea to do that, okay? Anything like that. And here's something else too that I talked about a little bit the other day. For years and years, you can ask about any mechanic where to put the best tires. If you're just gonna put two tires on a car, where do you think you ought to put them?
Put them in the rear end.
Put them in the rear, and it makes the car more stable. Most people like to put them in the front because they're thinking to get rid of the water. And I thought like that for years. But the tire manufacturers say if you got the best tires, you always put the best tires on the rear. If you're gonna have two new tires, they're only gonna replace two of them, put the best ones on the rear and the most worn out tires on the front. As counterintuitive as that might seem. You ask a lot of mechanics, they'll tell you it's the opposite. But the tire manufacturers are the ones that, that if you're ever in a court situation where somebody's getting sued because they put the tires in the wrong place, the court's always gonna look at what the tire manufacturer says. See what I'm saying? So go by what the tire manufacturer says. Now, how do you know how much air to put in a tire? Do you look at what's on the side of the tire?
The sticker in the door.
Sticker in the door. What's that on the side of the tire? What's
The
up
max pressure.
Huh?
The max pressure.
The max pressure for that tire. That's got nothing to do with the car. It's got to do with the max pressure for that tire. So you always look, if you can, on the door jamb. Sometimes it'll be on the sticker that's got the serial number on it. Sometimes it'll be a different sticker. I have seen it where you open the right rear door of the car and it'll be back there. So you open all the doors and look in there. If you don't see it, just estimate. Don't go by the max pressure, but estimate, the weight of the vehicle, all that. You can usually, go 35 pounds if you feel like you're, if it's a pickup or something, unless it's an oddball size. Or if it's low profile, it's going to be different. A tire is labeled 215/60 RX 1592T. What's the T indicate?
Load rating, load rating.
Speed rating.
No, speed
Speed
rating.
rating.
The speed rating is actually what
You
that
went
is.
down one too many.
That's the speed rating.
What?
Now, have you ever noticed, if you were driving a Mustang, like a really nice late model Mustang, and you went to Walmart and you just wanted to pick the cheapest tire, would that be feasible?
No.
They're not going to put the tire on there that's rated for less than the speed. The problem with going 140 miles an hour, if you don't have good tires, is the tires will come apart at high speeds. Right? So you got to have tires that are rated for the speed that the car is capable of going. Now, this is another little funny story. There was these guys that have a state trooper patch on their shoulder, but they don't have a regular state trooper uniform. They've got a light blue shirt and light blue pants. And as I remember, there's no stripe.
No.
And they're revenue enforcement people. And they pull vehicles over and they weigh these trucks and make sure that they don't have too much, I think 20,000 pounds per axle or whatever, and they actually give them tickets for that. Well, when I was at the Ford place, this guy came and he was driving a gray Crown Victoria. It was sort of like a sleeper car, you know, it didn't have state trooper decals on it or like that. And he says, my car won't go but about 100 miles an hour. And he says, you know, talking about his his state car. And I said, well, what do you want me to do about it? And he said, well, have a look at it and see what you get. I said, well, you know, I don't usually drive them that fast, and particularly a customer's car. And he says, well, I'll ride with you. I said, all right. So we headed around the bypass, and we went up toward 431, you know, went up 431 toward Headland, which is a long straight road, you know. And so I was hitting about 100 miles an hour, and he was sitting over in the seat, and he says, now be careful, because sometimes there'll be a trooper sitting right up here. Wait a minute, I thought there was a trooper sitting right here. You know, but his deal was, it doesn't matter if I'm sitting here, even if you're driving my car trying to fix it, if there's a trooper there, you'll get a ticket. And I didn't get a ticket, but I was thinking, this is sort of bogus. Well, it turned out he didn't even have a police car, he just had a regular old car that they had issued him, not a police interceptor, and that's why the car would stop. But the point is, it wasn't rated to go over 100 miles an hour, and so the tires that were on that car were not police radials. You see what I mean? So they're not, it's not high-speed tires. There's a lot more to that than you think. Oh, I'll tell you something else too. If tires, and I need to show you a picture of this, one of my students a while back had a big old nice 88 Blazer, right? And boy, did the tread on those tires looked as good as the ones on this one you just rotated out here. And he'd been driving that thing back and forth to school. And one day he didn't show up for school, and I sent him a message, said, where are you at? And he says, my tire, left front tire or right front tire, whichever one, through its tread. He left sent me a picture from my phone. I got it somewhere that I can show you. And it flipped over 5 times. But what the problem he had was his tires were too old. If they're over 6 years old, it doesn't matter what the tread looks like. They can throw the tread off. And that's what his did. And it cost him a vehicle. See, it didn't hurt him, but he flipped it over 5 times. And you could see the tire, the tread that had come off of it looked like a big ribbon out there. And it had nice, deep, you know, and the rest of the tires still look really good. So if it's over 6 years old, you need to start looking at, my wife had to have tires put on her Explorer because it's only got 23,000 miles on it. And anyway, the point is, because they were dry rotted, they looked like good tires when we put them on there because it was in too old.
We got some issues.
What is it?
Okay, when it shot out its first trouble code, it had a desired idle speed of 650 RPM, and it's idling at 1900.
Okay, so it's actually idling too fast now. Is that one got electronic throttle control on it?
I believe so.
Okay, so we got an issue going on with that. All right, keep working on that, see if you can figure out what the reason is for that. Okay. All right, uneven tire wear can be caused by what?
Any of the above.
Huh? Any of the above? That sounds right to me, doesn't it sound right to y'all? What's the minimum tread depth required in most states?
2 seconds, because that's where the tread wear indicators are.
Yeah, 2/32 of an inch, and in Alabama, we don't have vehicle inspections, and they don't check our tires and all this. There was a thing one time when they were gonna pass that, where the state troopers would stop people and check their tires, and give them a ticket if their tires were too worn, but then the court threw it out because they says if you're gonna inspect the tires, you're gonna have to look at everything else too. And the state troopers didn't wanna do a safety inspection on every car they stopped.
They can still do a safety inspection if
Yeah.
you make them mad enough on the
Yeah,
whole vehicle.
walk around the car and see
Yeah,
if
I
you got
figured
lights,
that
but they're
out.
not required to, you know what I'm saying? They probably do. I tell you, somebody that can do even more than a state trooper can.
Game warden.
The young game warden, yeah, the game warden can do anything to you he wants to, just about.
Yep.
And you gotta watch out for them guys.
You're right.
Wheel, if you had a Q-beam light in your truck, they're liable to run you in.
Yeah.
But wheel lug nut should be tightened to what? With a torque wrench, I actually put a thing on one of you guys torquing the wheels on one of our cars out here on my Facebook technical writer page. And, you know, this guy says, well, you know, yeah, that's the right way to do it, but, you know, people don't flat rate. Well, I will tell you this, if you don't want to use a torque wrench, you know, use your impact, get you some of them dog bone looking things, them long skinny colored sockets, because each one of them's rated for a different torque. You know what I mean? And you can actually put one of those on there. It's a long stem of a socket, but you can do that legitimately with one of those. But if you run them up too far or too hard with an impact wrench, you know, tighter and tighter and tighter is not necessarily okay, because it'll start to distort those threads. And when you go to, we've actually went to pull tires off here that somebody had over tightened with an impact wrench, and they had welded itself to the stud, and the thing breaks off. you know, the set brake. And actually, I've seen them too, where it would just turn, the little splines that go in the hub would break loose, and then all of a sudden you're trying to take the tires off, and now one of them is turning around and around and around in there.
That's why I'm missing.
It is a really, really difficult thing to deal with, especially if it's these high dollar wheels, it's got the lug nuts way up in a hole. You know what I'm saying? It's just a whole lot better to torque them, and I like to put a little dab of grease on the threads too, because you get better clamping force if you put a little lubricant on the threads, all that. And so, okay, Technician A says the Tinnerman nuts used to hold the brake drum on should be reinstalled when, you know what the Tinnerman nuts are?
They're little plastic clips that hold the brake drum on during assembly.
No, they're not plastic, they're actually a little spring steel thing that they got little, and you just zip, you slide them on there. And whenever they're running them down the assembly line, they don't want the brake drums falling off. So they just stick those on there and it keeps the brake drum on there while they're assembling. And you'll see them, you can tell if some people put them back on there, but you pull them off and leave them off. Like on some of the Ford transmissions, when you pull the transmission oil pan off the first time it was serviced, there was a little old plug with a stem on it and an O-ring around it, rolling around in the pan. That's because it was in the transmission until they got ready to put the dipstick in, and when they put the dipstick in, they shoved it on in and just let it roll around in the pan. Well, some mechanics that didn't know what that was would put it back in there because they thought it needed to be in the pan. Just something you leave off. Okay, disc brakes are used what? On both front and rear on some vehicles. Now, some of your GM trucks, and I'm sure some of the other makes that I'm not aware of, have gone back to drum brakes. So don't get the idea, you know, number 9 is basically C on the front and the rear, but a lot of your GM trucks are, and some of them other ones are putting drum brakes on. You need to know how to do drum brakes, you know what I mean? So don't think you're not gonna do drum brakes anymore. Primary purpose of anti-lock brakes is to do what?
All of the.
Have you ever had a situation where you were driving along? It's actually to allow the front wheels to be steered during braking. That's what it's for. Have you ever been driving in a vehicle maybe that didn't have any lock brakes, and you stood on the brakes and it started to slide, and then you tried to turn the wheels?
Yeah, it just kind of.
It's the scariest daggum thing in the world. The first time I ran into that, I was about 16 years old, without courage. And I'm driving down the road on my little, and it was raining, and I hit the brakes and it started to slide, and I was going toward an intersection, and I turned the wheels and the car just kept going straight. Unless you're in sand or something that can use like a rudder, when them front wheels are sliding, you're going to keep going straight no matter what you do with the wheel.
I learned about turning the wheels in sand, either
Now,
flips.
if the ABS system is working, it will pulse that. You'll still be stopping, but you'll still be able to steer it. That's what ABS is all about. Also, another thing ABS is for, and this is not totally true, the way that the way the answer key is said. If you're, I think all of the above is a good answer, but that's not what the answer key says, you know what I'm saying? But that doesn't reduce brake lining wear either. That's not really what that's for. Shorter stopping distance, debatable, because you know if you ever started sliding, you know you'll pick up speed, seems like, especially on a wet road. I got on a Ford Probe one time, and anti-lock brakes work different on different vehicles. On these Jeep Cherokees, they had ABS on those, and when I was working on one to make sure the ABS was working right after I got through working on the ABS system, I'd go out on a dirt road and I would slide the wheels. And when you slide the wheels on a Jeep Cherokee on a hard dirt road, it goes, it feels like a bucket Bronco, you know. Well, I got on that Ford Probe, and I was on a long, slick piece of wet pavement out there when it was raining a little bit, and I just done some ABS work on it. I was going to see if they worked okay. And I got up to about 65 miles an hour, because that's what the speed limit was. No other traffic around, there wasn't anybody out there. You know, this was closed course. Don't try this at home, this kind of thing, like you said. And I stood on the brake really hard to see if it would slide, and it stopped like it was on wet pavement, dry pavement. You didn't even feel the brake pulsing, but it should have slid. In my mind, I'm thinking this thing ought to slide, but it didn't slide because the ABS on that one was tuned for a sporty car, and on the old Broncos and stuff, you know, it whip like that kind of thing. So, but anyway, that's a good deal there. What's the color of the warning light that indicates hydraulic brake system failure?
Red.
It's a red one. How many of you guys have seen that? How many of you guys have ever experienced brake failure? What happens when you, oh yeah, you recently on your white ones, what happened there? Did you run into anything? Yeah.
I ran into Taylor.
I tell you what I did you run into Taylor? Whenever I was driving this little Volkswagen Bug, a 66 Bug I had one time, I pulled into the parking lot of this convenience store where my wife was working at the time. And this was way back in 1981. And I was, pretty good gunslinger on that, park brake, if something didn't happen. And so, but this thing, the way the brakes were done, it had a little brake fluid reservoir in there where the spare tire goes, and it had a little pipe going down here to the master cylinder into a little grommet. And sometimes that little grommet started to leak a little bit, and I wound up with no brake fluid and didn't know it. Because it would, and when I pulled in, I hit the brake, and there was not a brake nowhere of any kind, and I was headed toward, the building, and I grabbed the park brake and jerked it up, and the cable broke. And I jumped the curb. The cable broke when I jerked it because I was adrenaline, ooh, golly, so anyway, I jumped the curb and I ran into a newspaper machine, just smashed it. And then I backed it off and I just let it sit on the curb. Of course, on a Volkswagen Bug, when you run into the newspaper machine, it bends the front of the Bug down. Now the lights are pointing at the pavement, And so I went in and bought my soda pop or whatever, and I eased it back around there to my house because I wasn't very far from where I lived. And so I chained both the front bumper supports to the back of my pickup truck, and I backed up, bam, jerked it back out like it was supposed to be, and that thing never leaked brake fluid again. I don't know what to do with that. That's a true story. Okay. Another time I had a brake failure on a different Volkswagen Bug. We were headed toward an intersection. Me and Johnny, this guy that was a friend of mine, were in this old car that my dad bought sight unseen for $50 from a couple of soldiers. And they said, this car quit running and we're sick of it. And he said, well, I'll give you $50 for it. And he went and got it back. I drove it that weekend. And the brakes failed on that one for the same reason, and there was two cars coming. We were about to go across the road. There's two cars coming, and they were about 20 feet apart, and we went between them. The scariest thing I've ever seen. We didn't hit nothing, but golly, that was scary. Even thinking about it scared me. A proportioning valve is part of what system? Balance system. Basically, you're wanting to make sure, that whenever it's pretty complicated, whenever you hit the brake, you don't want the back brakes to get juice, before the front ones do, because the back, you're tilting forward anyway, your weight's going off the back wheels and all that. Also, you reason you put ABS on pickup trucks is going around curves, or in vans, it became mandatory in 1987 for rear anti-lock brakes. You're going around a curve, and it's kind of a slippery day, you hit the brake, going around a curve, it's going to spin out on you. That's ugly, okay? So you don't want that. So the anti-lock brakes on the rear were for that reason, they weren't necessarily for the steering aspect of it. The types of frames used include what?
Any of the above depending on.
Any of the above depending on the vehicle. You got full frame, stub top frame, ladder frame, and we still got to get his 5-minute speech on that thing. You ready for that? Did you get it all figured out?
Yes, sir.
You can do it? You can tell us what that thing said, right? All right, we're going to give him a chance, okay? All right. All right, rotation of the steering wheel causes which part to move? The actual steering linkage and a rack and pinion. No, wait a minute, excuse me. A witness mark is what?
A mark made when two parts touch each other and leave a mark.
That's right, that's pretty good. If you look under there, if you hear some scrubbing noise or you hear some kind of a racket when you're turning the wheels or when you're going over bumps, you look under there and you see it. Now, there was one time, this is kind of a little funny story. I know y'all like my funny stories. This guy was talking to me on the phone about his Jeep Comanche, and he said when he loaded it with feed, it would make a click, 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 click noise. But when he took the feed out, it didn't make that noise. And he told me on the phone that what they had discovered was, the park brake cable that goes back here to the park brakes? Whenever you load it down, it would move over and it would touch the weight on the tire. And do that. I just said, well, that's interesting. I hadn't heard of that before. But anyway, he says there's a little spring there, and you just move that spring and it holds it off the tire, and it takes care of the problem. And so the following week, one of the shop foremans, they had a Jeep that was making a noise whenever it was loaded. We made up a bunch of us guys get in the Jeep. It's, a bunch of us in the back and a couple of us in the front. We were driving along, and he was hearing it go click, 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 click. And I said, I heard that guy talking about that. And I told Johnny, the shop foreman, I said, stop the Jeep, stop it right now. So he stops and pulls over, and I got out and laid under there and moved that spring. And he drove it, and all the noise was gone. And he said, you must have seen this before. And I said, nope, never have. I just knew what it was. Kind of makes him feel bad because he was trying to troubleshoot. But anyway, this is the whole thing. When somebody's telling you something, remember what they're telling you, and sometimes you'll know stuff that other people don't know. Store it away. Let me see here. For you. The rotation of steering wheel causes which part to move? The actual steering linkage in a rack and pinion steering gear.
Hey.
That's the rack that's connected to the front wheels through the tie rods. Now, inner and outer tie rod ends can wear out. You know, the inner tie rod end is right there close to the rack. Sometimes you'll grab those tires and move them, and you'll actually see it go tum, 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 tum. And it won't be the outer tie rod end, it'll be the inner one. And on the inner one, you got to screw that thing off the end of the rack. So it means you got to take that boot off. There shouldn't be any oil in that boot if the rack's not leaking. And you got to screw that thing off there. And we had a Taurus over here one day. We needed to replace an inner tie rod end on, and we absolutely could not get that thing to budge. You might notice that one of my big wrenches in here is bent. The head of it's bent at a 90. I put that on there, and we had a big pry bar in the end of it trying to break that thing loose, and it just absolutely would not move. And so we got the torch and put a little heat on it, and I guess we melted the Loctite or whatever, and you can just screw it off with your fingers. You know, so that's the only time I ever run into that. That's crazy.
Loctite melts?
Huh?
Loctite melts?
Yeah. Yeah, Loctite melts. Yeah, Loctite, it turns into hard plastic and it'll melt. That's why you can't use it in where there's gonna be lots of fire and all. Okay, where are we at? Which is the type of spring?
All of them.
All the above, torsion bar, leaf, coil. Most trucks and larger rear-wheel drive vehicles use which type of frame?
Full frame.
They use a full frame, which looks like a ladder, and it's got the rubber mounts on it. And that's why you'll see a lot of these guys, when they're doing engine work, they'll actually pick the truck up off the body, and just, you know, it's a whole lot easier to work on the engine when you got the thing picked up. Which of the following is not true of a McPherson strut? This is like an ASC question.
That attaches steering wheel.
Ma'am, what?
Attached to the steering wheel. Struts attached to the steering wheel.
Now, there's one of the statements is not true. A, they're only used on the front of a vehicle. Is that true?
Yeah.
Huh?
No, it's not true.
That's not true, is it?
Oh.
They're not used just on the front of the vehicle. You'll have them, most of these vehicles have got them on the front.
It's
and rear.
obvious answer, there was missed it.
Some pickups have got struts over there. Technician A says the pitman arm is connected to the steering gear. Technician B says the idler arm is used with all rack and pinion steering linkages. Who's right about that?
I'd say technician A.
Technician A, because you don't have an idler arm with a rack and pinion. No point in that at all. Technician A says federal law requires all vehicles be equipped with collapsible steering columns. What do they need those for? What's up with that?
So if you get in a collision and it bends your frame, your steering wheel will collapse. It's like some two separate pieces.
Through that, yep. Technician B says tilt mechanism allows the steering wheel to turn more sharply. Which technician is correct?
A.
Excuse me, yeah, okay, technician A is right. I've done a little, but here's another thing too. Does anybody know, and you're gonna hear more about this when we get into steering and suspension, if you guys stay with me that long. You know what toot is?
What is?
Toot?
I have no clue.
That stands for toe out on turns. Like when you're turning, the inside wheel needs to turn sharper than the outside wheel. Okay,
Yeah.
now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna let Mr. Kendrick get up here, and you can use your article for notes, okay? He's gonna get up here and he's gonna tell us what he learned about these BMWs.
Oh, gosh.
I learned how to hot wire one day.